On the afternoon of February 20, 1943, a Mexican farmer named Dionisio Pulido was plowing a cornfield in the state of Michoacán when the ground cracked open beneath his feet. A fissure roughly half a meter deep appeared in the soil. From it rose gray smoke smelling of sulfur, rotten eggs, unmistakable. The air turned heavy. A hissing sound, like a steam valve releasing pressure, filled the field. Pulido did what any farmer would do, he tried to fill the crack with dirt. The crack pushed back. Small stones and sparks erupted from the gap. He abandoned his plow, gathered his wife Paula and their son, and ran. By nightfall, the sky above his field glowed red. By morning, there was a cone of ash and cinder 30 meters tall where the cornfield had been. Within a week, it was 50 meters. Within a year, it was taller than the Eiffel Tower. Within 9 years, it had buried 2 towns, reshaped the landscape of an entire region, and given science something it had never possessed before. A complete, documented record of a volcano's entire life, from the first crack in the earth to the last wisp of steam, witnessed by human eyes from beginning to end. The volcano was named after the village it consumed. It was called Parícutin. It was, and remains, one of the strangest events in the recorded history of the planet. Why here, the volcanic heart of Mexico? To understand why a volcano could appear in a cornfield with 2 weeks' warning, you need to look at the map of central Mexico's interior. Running east to west across the country is the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt, a zone where the Cocos and Rivera tectonic plates are grinding beneath the North American plate, generating the pressure and heat that have produced some of the most active volcanoes in the Western Hemisphere, including Popocatépetl. Within this belt, the state of Michoacán sits atop the Michoacán-Guanajuato volcanic field, one of the most densely packed concentrations of volcanic vents on Earth. The field contains more than 1,400 individual volcanic structures. But unlike the great stratovolcanoes that erupt repeatedly over millennia from the same central vent, the volcanoes of this field are monogenetic, each one forms, erupts once over a period of years or decades, and then goes permanently silent. The magma finds a new path, and the old cone becomes a hill. Parícutin was the youngest of these 1,400 structures. And because it was born in 1943, not in prehistory, not in the poorly documented past, but in the middle of the 20th century, with geologists, cameras, and measuring instruments available within days, it became something unique in the history of volcanology, a volcano that science could watch grow up. 2 weeks of warning. The Earth did not open without announcement. Beginning in early February 1943, the Michoacán region experienced an escalating series of tremors, small at first, then increasingly frequent and intense, accompanied by a deep subterranean rumbling that local residents described as distant thunder, heard not just through the air but through the ground beneath their feet. For the Purapeca people who farmed the valleys around what would become Parícutin, this was genuinely unprecedented. The last monogenetic volcano in the region, El Girollo, had erupted in 1759, nearly 2 centuries before anyone alive could remember. There was no cultural memory of what the warning signs meant. Families lived through 2 weeks of tremors, watching their wells develop cracks, watching the ground shift, without knowing that the shaking was not an earthquake but a birth. Dionisio Pulido, the man who owned the volcano. Dionisio Pulido's account of the eruption's first moments became one of the most frequently cited eyewitness testimonies in volcanological literature, not because it was dramatic in the literary sense, but because it was precise. He noted the smell, the sound, the temperature of the air, the behavior of the fissure as he attempted to close it. Scientists who arrived within days found his description accurate in every particular. What is less often told is what happened to Pulido afterward. He had owned the field called Cuyutsi where the volcano was born. As the eruption continued and scientists descended on the region from across the world, Pulido found himself the nominal owner of an active volcano, a distinction that brought him no income and considerable misery, as his entire livelihood had been buried under ash and lava within months. He eventually sold the land to the Mexican painter and naturalist Gerardo Murillo, known as Dr. ATL, who had become obsessed with the eruption and documented it in hundreds of paintings and sketches. The sale price was modest. Pulido spent the rest of his life in relative obscurity, reportedly telling anyone who asked that he wished the volcano had chosen someone else's cornfield. He died in 1958, 6 years after the eruption ended. He is buried in Nuevo San Juan Parangaricutiro, the replacement town built for the residents displaced by Parícutin. His grave, in the cemetery of a town that exists because of his field, is marked with a simple stone. 9 years, the 4 phases of a volcano's life. Volcanologists who documented Parícutin divided its 9-year life into 4 distinct phases, each named for a local landmark and each characterized by a different pattern of activity. The first phase, named Quetzalco after an old indigenous settlement, lasted from the eruption's first day in February 1943 through October of the same year. The activity was Strombolian in character, continuous explosions throwing glowing lava bombs, lapilli, and dense clouds of ash into the air, with the cinder cone growing at a rate that defied belief. In the first 24 hours, 30 meters. By the end of the first week, 50 meters. By late March, 148 meters. Lava flows began emerging from the base of the cone in June, moving slowly but inexorably toward the inhabited valleys below. The second phase, Sapichu. Little One, in the Purupeca language, opened in October 1943 when a secondary vent formed on the northeast flank of the cone, producing particularly intense fountains of lava and ash clouds so thick they blocked the sun over a radius of several kilometers. The surrounding landscape, already stressed by 8 months of ashfall, lost its remaining vegetation entirely. The third and most destructive phase, Taki, ran from January 1944 through early 1947. The character of the eruption shifted from explosive to effusive. Massive lava flows emerged from fissures at the volcano's base rather than from the summit crater. These flows were basaltic andesitic in composition, relatively viscous, moving at speeds ranging from a few meters per hour on flat ground to a few meters per minute on slopes. It was during this phase that the lava consumed the village of Parícutin entirely, and advanced on San Juan Parangaricutiro. The fourth and final phase, Yuancho, lasted from 1947 until March 4, 1952. The eruption wound down gradually, explosions becoming less frequent, lava flows reduced to brief pulses. The magma chamber feeding the volcano had been exhausted. On March 4, 1952, the last recorded explosion occurred. Parícutin fell silent. Its final height, 424 meters above the surrounding plateau, 2,800 meters above sea level. A mountain where there had been a cornfield, in less than a decade. 2 towns lost. The village of Parícutin itself was evacuated early and thoroughly. But the larger settlement of San Juan Parangaricutiro, a town of several thousand people, a regional commercial center with a significant colonial-era church, faced a slower and more agonizing end. The lava did not arrive suddenly. It advanced through 1944 in waves, surrounding the town gradually, filling the streets at the pace of a slow walk. Residents organized religious processions around the advancing flows, praying for intervention. They watched the black rock fill the plazas, topple the stone houses, ignite the wooden roofs. They had time, weeks of it, to carry out the church archives, the religious icons, the municipal records. What they could not carry was the town itself. When the lava finally hardened and the landscape settled into its new form, almost nothing of San Juan Parangaricutiro was visible above the surface. Almost nothing, except the facade and upper tower of the Church of San Juan, which had been built from stone heavy enough and positioned high enough that the lava flowed around it rather than over it. The church interior was filled to the ceiling with solidified basalt. The altar was gone, the nave destroyed, the bells buried. But the facade stood. It still stands. Rising from a frozen black sea of lava, the ruined church of San Juan Parangaricutiro is now one of the most photographed landscapes in Mexico, a surrealist monument to the indifference of geology and the stubbornness of stone. 0 deaths from lava. Among the most remarkable facts about Parícutin's 9-year eruption is this: not a single person was killed by lava or by the volcanic explosions themselves. The slow pace of the flows, predictable, visible, measurable, allowed complete evacuations of every settlement in the lava's path. The Puripeka communities had weeks, sometimes months, to move. 3 deaths were recorded in the region during the entire eruption. All 3 were caused by lightning, the intense electrical activity generated by the static charge of ash particles in the eruption column, which created near-continuous thunderstorms above the crater. A farmer, a child, a rider on horseback, struck from above while the lava moved too slowly to catch anyone on foot. This makes Parícutin one of the least lethal major volcanic events of the 20th century by direct casualty count, and one of the most humanly devastating by displacement. Approximately 4,000 people lost their homes, their land, and the physical landscape of their entire world. The displacement was total and permanent. The new settlement, Nuevo San Juan Parangaricutiro, was built in a safe zone several kilometers away. It is a functioning town today. But the old town, and the cornfield where it all began, remain under the lava. What science learned? Parícutin's scientific value was immediately recognized. Researchers from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the Smithsonian Institution, and geological surveys from the United States and Europe arrived within days of the eruption's start and maintained a continuous scientific presence for most of the 9 years that followed. The resulting body of research, hundreds of papers, thousands of photographs, continuous gas and seismic measurements, formed a cornerstone of modern volcanology. Before Parícutin, the internal mechanics of cinder cone formation were largely theoretical. Scientists understood that explosive eruptions built conical hills of tephra, but the precise relationship between eruption rate, particle size, wind direction, and the final geometry of the cone was poorly constrained. Parícutin provided a full dataset from day one. Measurements taken weekly, sometimes daily, of the cone's changing dimensions allowed geologists to construct quantitative models of cinder cone growth that are still used in volcanology today. The gas chemistry data was equally valuable. Samples collected directly from fumaroles, the vents through which volcanic gases escape, at different stages of the eruption allowed chemists to track how the composition of the magma changed as it degassed over 9 years. This provided direct evidence for models of how volatiles drive volcanic explosions. As magma rises and pressure decreases, dissolved gases come out of solution, and their expansion is what throws material into the air. Parícutin made this process visible, measurable, and documented. Perhaps most unexpectedly, Parícutin provided a long-term study of ecological succession, the process by which life reclaims a landscape destroyed by volcanic activity. Scientists who had documented the complete destruction of the surrounding forest in 1943 returned years later to track the return of lichens, mosses, ferns, and eventually shrubs and trees to the lava fields. The data from Parícutin directly informed later ecological studies of the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption and the 1991 Pinatubo eruption in the Philippines. The landscape today. Parícutin is classified today as an extinct monogenetic volcano. The probability of renewed activity from this specific vent is effectively zero. The tectonic processes that created it continue, and somewhere in the Michoacán Guanajuato field, pressure is building toward another birth. But not here. This particular story is finished. The landscape around the cone covers approximately 25 square kilometers of what geologists call AA lava. The rough, jagged, clinker-like surface formed when viscous basaltic lava cools while still moving, creating a texture that tears boots and turns ankles. Walking across it is slow and difficult even today. In the decades since the eruption ended, lichens have begun colonizing the rock surface, breaking it down chemically, beginning the centuries-long process of turning basalt back into soil. Tourists and hikers now make the journey from the village of Angawan to the ruins of the Church of San Juan on foot or horseback, and then continue to the summit of the cone itself, a steep climb up loose volcanic scoria to a crater rim that offers an unobstructed view of the entire lava field and the distant green mountains of Michoacán beyond. From the depths of the crater, faint wisps of warm vapor still rise on cold mornings. The last breath of a mountain that was born in an afternoon, grew to 424 meters in 9 years, and then, like every monogenetic volcano before it, simply stopped. Dionisio Pulido tried to fill the crack with dirt. The mountain had other plans.